Welcome to another Deep Dives. This time we're going to be looking at the 50th Law. It's by 50 Cent and Robert Greene. I got to say, this book
Yeah.
was not what I expected.
Yeah, it's a pretty wild pairing, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, 50 Cent, you know?
The rapper, entrepreneur, and then Robert Greene. Ooh, if you've listened to this show before, you know that we're big fans of his work.
Yeah.
48 Laws of Power, The Art of Seduction, Mastery, all these books that really, kind of delve into the strategies and kind of the history of power and success.
Yeah, and this one, it's like street smarts meet ancient wisdom. That's what it feels like.
Yeah.
And they really do complement each other.
Yeah.
We're going to be talking about fearlessness, self-reliance, opportunism. It's almost like a blueprint for mastering the game of life.
Yeah, and they use some really incredible examples to illustrate these principles, too.
Yeah.
We're going to be looking at figures throughout history, from Napoleon to Reuben Hurricane Carter. We'll even be drawing some parallels to 50 Cent's own journey. Well, let's jump into it then.
Yeah.
First up is this idea of intense realism.
Yeah.
And 50 Cent talks about reality being his drug.
Yeah.
I don't know if I'd go that far. But I get what he's saying.
Yeah.
It's about seeing the world for what it is.
Yeah.
No sugarcoating.
Yeah, and he's not just talking about, acknowledging the tough stuff. It's also about seeing opportunity where others see only obstacles. And he connects this to the fall of the Roman Empire, which I think is a fascinating connection.
Wait, what does ancient Rome have to do with 50 Cent?
Well, Greene argues that as Rome became more powerful, its citizens grew complacent. They started ignoring the problems that were kind of creeping in at the edges of the empire. And they were clinging to this illusion of their invincibility. And there's this story about Emperor Nero fiddling while Rome burned. Literally, he was so detached from reality that he was composing music while the city went up in flames.
Wow. That's a pretty stark example of what can happen when you lose touch with what's really going on. So how do we avoid becoming modern-day Neros?
I think it starts with being honest with ourselves, even when it's uncomfortable. What are we avoiding? What are the tough truths that we're not facing?
And that's where things get personal, right? I mean, everyone has those areas where they'd rather look the other way.
Yeah, absolutely. But 50 Cent and Greene argue that facing those uncomfortable truths head on is actually the path to greater power. It's about using that clear-eyed view of reality to make better decisions, to anticipate obstacles, and ultimately to maneuver more effectively in the world.
You're seeing reality clearly. Now what? And this is where make everything your own.
Yeah.
Self-reliance comes in. And there's no better example of this than Cornelius Vanderbilt. The guy started his own ferry business at 16.
Yeah, he borrowed $100 from his mom, bought a boat, and within a year he'd paid her back, and was well on his way to building a shipping empire. Talk about early hustle.
It's that, never be a minion. Always be an owner mentality. And you see that same entrepreneurial spirit in 50 Cent's journey? He was determined to become the first artist with an independent record label, breaking free from kind of the traditional power structures of the music industry.
Yeah, he saw the limitations of being dependent on others, and he decided to forge his own path, which, brings us to another powerful example of self-reliance. Reuben Hurricane Carter, wrongfully convicted of murder. He spent nearly 2 decades in prison.
Yeah, I remember hearing about his case. It was a huge injustice.
Oh, absolutely. But what's incredible is that even within the confines of prison, Carter refused to be broken. He wouldn't wear a uniform, refused to eat with the other prisoners. He basically lived like a free man, even within those walls.
That takes serious mental strain. So for the average person who, thankfully, isn't facing a wrongful imprisonment sentence, how do we apply this kind of self-reliance to our own challenges?
I think it's about taking responsibility for our own lives, not waiting for someone else to solve our problems or to give us permission to act. It's about seeking solutions, developing our skills, and cultivating that inner strength that allows us to navigate any situation.
So step 1, see reality clearly. Step 2, own your path. And step 3, well, this is where it gets interesting, turn shit into sugar. Opportunism. 50 Cent built his career on this. It's that classic hustler mentality, turning negatives into positives, obstacles into fuel.
It's about that ability to reframe, to see potential where others see only problems.
You think that's what helped someone like Barack Obama achieve the seemingly impossible? I mean, everyone told him he was too young, too inexperienced to run for president.
Exactly. But instead of letting those doubts hold him back, he used them to his advantage. His outsider status became a symbol of hope and change. It's a brilliant example of how what others perceive as a weakness can be flipped into a strength.
But opportunist usually has
Yeah.
a negative connotation, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Like you're taking advantage of people or situations.
Yeah. That's the traditional view. But 50 Cent and Greene challenge that. They argue that true opportunism is about resourcefulness. It's about seeing those moments that others might miss and having the courage to seize them.
So it's less about being manipulative
Yeah.
and more about being aware and ready to act when the right moment presents itself.
Precisely. And that requires a certain mindset, one that embraces fluidity over rigidity. And that's what they call keep moving, calculated momentum.
Okay. So explain this one to me. It sounds a bit like going with the flow, but with a plan.
It's like navigating a river. You don't fight the current, you work with it. You adjust your course as needed, using the flow to your advantage. And it's about being open to unexpected opportunities. They use Leonardo da Vinci as an example.
Da Vinci, the painter, what's he got to do with this?
He was so much more than just a painter. He was an engineer,
Yeah.
an inventor, a scientist. He allowed his curiosity to flow across different disciplines. And it was those unexpected connections that led to some of his greatest breakthroughs.
So it's not about sticking rigidly to a plan. It's more about having a direction, but being open to detours and adjustments along the way.
Exactly. Think of it as calculated momentum. It's about moving forward strategically, but with the flexibility to adapt and change course as needed. And that leads us to a principle that might seem a bit controversial. Know when to be bad. Aggression.
Okay, this one I'm curious about. Is this where 50 Cent street cred comes in?
Well, 50 Cent certainly embodies a certain kind of assertiveness, but they argue that controlled aggression, strategically applied, can be a tool for anyone. It's about knowing when to push back, when to stand your ground, and when to disrupt the status quo.
I get that, but we're always told to be nice, to play by the rules. When? When is it okay to be bad?
It's not about being mean or unethical. It's about knowing when to challenge the norm, to shake things up a bit. They contrast this with historical examples, where open conflict was much more accepted. Like back in Shakespeare's day, audiences would heckle actors during a play, even throw things. Can you imagine that happening today?
I'd probably get kicked out.
Yep. Right.
So are they saying we've become too conflict averse?
It's possible. They argue that we've become so focused on avoiding confrontation that we sometimes miss opportunities to assert ourselves and make our voices heard.
What's the takeaway here? Are we all supposed to start picking fights to get ahead?
Not at all. It's about recognizing that there are times when a little bit of strategic assertiveness can be incredibly effective. It's about finding that balance between being respectful and being willing to stand up for what you believe in.
All right. So we've talked about seeing reality clearly, owning our path, embracing opportunities, and knowing when to push back. What's next?
Next, we delve into the importance of leadership, with led from the front, authority. And this is where 50 Cent's street smarts offer a surprisingly insightful perspective.
I'm all ears.
So they talk about 50 Cent's drug dealing days. He would give out free samples of his product to get feedback from users. He called them his testers. And their input was crucial to ensuring quality and building trust.
So even as a drug dealer, he was focused on building a loyal customer base.
Exactly. And they connect this to the idea of leading from the front, you know. True leadership isn't about barking orders from a distance. It's about being present, being visible, and understanding the needs of those you lead. They contrast this with the image of a general, hiding out in his tent, making decisions without any real connection to the front lines.
Yeah, I get it. It's about walking the walk, not just talking the talk. Leading by example, being in the trenches with your team.
Exactly. It's about building trust and inspiring others through your actions. Which style of leadership resonates more with you, the general in the tent or the leader on the front lines?
That's a good question. I'm definitely more drawn to the idea of being in the thick of things alongside my team. But it's something to think about for sure. Okay, what else do 50 Cent and Greene have to say about navigating the game of life?
Well, they emphasize the importance of know your environment from the inside out, connection. And this principle really resonated with me. It's about staying grounded, remembering where you came from, even as you rise in the ranks.
Yeah, I can see how that's especially crucial in 50 Cent's world.
Yeah.
You know, coming from where he did and achieving the success he has.
Absolutely. They use the example of Malcolm X, who, as he gained prominence, started to worry about becoming disconnected from his roots. And he made a conscious effort to stay connected to the people he represented, even seeking out those from the lower depths, as he called them.
It's like that saying, you know, never forget where you came from.
Yeah.
It's easy to get caught up in your own world.
Yeah.
You know? Your own success and lose sight of the bigger picture.
It's a reminder to check in with ourselves, you know? Are our endeavors still reflecting our original passions? Are we staying true to our core values? It's easy to get swept away by the current and lose sight of the shore.
Okay, I'm feeling a bit introspective now. Maybe it's time for a reality check. Speaking of which, the next principle is respect the process. Mastery. 50 Cent talks about how hustlers, always chasing fast money, often miss out on developing lasting skills.
They burn out quickly because they haven't mastered the fundamentals. They haven't put in the time and effort required to build a solid foundation.
It's that get-rich-quick mentality. That seems so prevalent these days. Everyone wants a shortcut, a magic formula.
Right.
But 50 Cent and Greene argue that true success is built on patience, discipline, and a willingness to embrace the long game.
They contrast the hustler's mindset with Isaac Newton, who during the plague used isolation as an opportunity for deep learning. He spent months going over the same mathematical problems day after day. It was in that focused repetition, that dedication to the process, that he made some of his greatest discoveries.
That's incredible. It makes you think about how we often waste time complaining about being bored, when we could be using that time to develop a new skill or dive deeper into a subject that fascinates us.
And they also offer some practical examples of historical figures who exemplified this respect for the process, like Jack Johnson, who learned to box by fighting anyone he could find, trial and error, putting in the reps.
Or Demosthenes, the Athenian orator who overcame a stammer through relentless practice.
And Michelangelo, who honed his artistic skills through meticulous anatomical studies, even dissecting corpses to understand the human form.
Okay, that one's a little creepy, but I get the point. It's about attention to detail, dedication, and a willingness to go deep. No shortcuts, no quick fixes.
And I think there's also something to be said for the psychological effect of mastering a process.
Mhm.
It builds confidence,
Yeah.
resilience, that sense of, I can figure anything out that can be applied to any area of life.
Which brings us to push beyond your limits. Self-belief. 50 Cent's career is a testament to this. He's constantly reinventing himself, from hustler to rapper to mogul, always pushing past perceived limitations.
It's a powerful example of how self-belief fuels willpower and resilience. He didn't let his circumstances define him. He believed in his ability to achieve something greater, and he made it happen.
But how? How do you cultivate that kind of self-belief when you're surrounded by negativity, doubt, people telling you what you can't do?
I think it starts with recognizing your own inherent work and potential. It's about challenging those limiting beliefs that you've internalized, maybe from childhood, maybe from society, and replacing them with a more empowering narrative. You are capable of more than you think.
It's not about ignoring feedback or becoming arrogant, right?
Right.
It's about filtering that feedback through a lens of self-belief,
Yeah,
using it to refine your approach without compromising your vision.
exactly. It's about trusting your gut, having the courage to bet on yourself, even when others doubt you. And that leads us to the final and perhaps most profound principle. Confront your mortality.
The sublime.
Okay, this one sounds heavy. Are we going to a dark place?
Not necessarily. 50 Cent and Greene approach the idea of death, not as a terrifying endpoint, but as an intrinsic part of life, something we carry within us from the moment we're born. And they draw inspiration from the Stoic philosopher Seneca.
Seneca, didn't he have a bit of a dramatic end? He did. Forced to commit suicide by Nero, ironically. But Seneca had spent his life mentally rehearsing his own death, not out of morbidity, but as a way to overcome fear and live more fully in the present.
So it's about facing the inevitable, not to be morbid, but to gain a deeper appreciation for life.
Exactly. By contemplating our mortality, we can actually gain a greater appreciation for the present moment. It allows us to prioritize what truly matters, to shed those petty anxieties and fears that hold us back, and to live with a sense of urgency and purpose.
It's almost like a paradox. By acknowledging death, we can actually live more fully.
They also talk about the concept of the sublime, those experiences that take us to the edge of our understanding, that evoke a sense of awe and wonder, like gazing at the night sky, experiencing a profound work of art, or even pushing our physical limits to the point of exhaustion.
So it's about those moments that make us feel small, but also connected to something larger than ourselves.
It's in those moments, when we confront the vastness and mystery of existence, that we can get a glimpse of our own mortality, but in a way that's not terrifying, but rather exhilarating. It can shake us out of our routines, expand our perspectives, and fuel our creative fire.
It's like a reminder that we're part of something bigger, but also that our time here is limited. So what's the takeaway? How do we actually apply this in our daily lives?
I think it starts with a shift in perspective. Instead of seeing death as this looming endpoint, We can view it as a constant companion, a reminder of the preciousness of each moment.
And that ties back to that sense of urgency.
Right.
Knowing that our time is finite can be a powerful motivator to pursue our passions, to take risks, to make the most of every opportunity.
It can help us break free from those patterns of procrastination and indecision that hold us back. We start asking ourselves, if not now, when?
And I'm thinking about how this ties into the idea of fearlessness in general. If we can overcome the fear of death, the ultimate fear, would that diminish the power of all those smaller fears that plague us? Suddenly, that presentation at work, or that difficult conversation we've been avoiding, doesn't seem so daunting.
Precisely. It gives us a sense of proportion. Those everyday anxieties and worries seem less significant, less capable of controlling our actions.
And that can be incredibly empowering.
Yeah.
To be able to approach challenges with a sense of detachment, knowing that even if we fail, it's not the end of the world.
It's about embracing that stoic ideal of focusing on what we can control, our actions, our thoughts, our responses, and letting go of the rest.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here. We've talked about confronting reality, mastering ourselves, even facing our own mortality. It's a lot to digest.
Absolutely, but it's all interconnected, These
Right.
principles point towards cultivating fearlessness, both in how we act and how we think.
It's not about becoming some kind of fearless superhero.
Right.
It's a journey of self-discovery, challenge, and growth.
Exactly. It's about constantly pushing beyond our comfort zones, questioning our assumptions, and developing that unshakable self-belief that allows us to achieve our full potential.
One of the things that struck me about the 50th Law is that it's not just a book about success, it's a book about freedom.
That's a great point. And that freedom comes from mastering ourselves, our fears, our impulses, our limiting beliefs. It's about recognizing that we have more agency than we often realize, and that the choices we make, day in and day out, determine the course of our lives.
And those choices are often driven by fear, consciously or unconsciously. So what 50 Cent and Greene are offering is a roadmap for breaking free from that fear-based decision-making and stepping into a place of true power and self-determination.
It's about recognizing that the only limits we have are the ones we impose on ourselves.
All right, I want to circle back to intense realism. It feels like the foundation for everything else.
It's crucial. It's about seeing the world for what it is, without illusions or denial, and that clear-eyed perspective is essential for making effective decisions and navigating the complexities of life.
And it's not just about seeing the negative.
Right.
It's about seeing opportunities that others might miss, understanding human nature, both our own and that of others. 50 Cent talks about how he learned to read people on the streets, to anticipate their motives and actions.
And that ability to assess situations and people accurately is key for avoiding unnecessary risks and making strategic moves.
It's like that old saying, forewarned is forearmed. The more we understand the reality of a situation, the better equipped we are to deal with it effectively.
And that understanding comes from observation, experience, and from a willingness to learn from our mistakes.
It's also about being adaptable, right? The world is constantly changing, and those who cling to rigid beliefs and strategies
Are likely to get left behind.
Exactly. It's about cultivating that fluidity, that ability to adjust our approach based on the ever-shifting circumstances. Which brings us back to calculated momentum. It's about moving forward strategically, but with a flexibility to adapt and change course as needed.
It's about being both strategic and opportunistic, seizing those moments when the tide is in our favor, and adjusting our course when necessary.
That requires a certain level of detachment, wouldn't you say?
I think so.
We can't be so emotionally invested in our plans that we're unable to adapt when things don't go as expected.
It's about accepting that setbacks and failures are an inevitable part of the journey, and that our ability to learn from them is what ultimately determines our success.
So as we navigate our own paths, it's important to remember that fearlessness is not the absence of fear, but rather the courage to act in spite of it.
It's about recognizing that fear is a natural human emotion, but it doesn't have to control us. We can choose to face our fears, to challenge them, and to use them as fuel for growth.
And that's a powerful message, isn't it? That we have the power to shape our own destinies, to overcome adversity, and to achieve greatness, no matter our circumstances.
It's a message that resonates throughout history, from the streets of Southside Queens to the halls of power. And it's a message that each of us can embrace and apply in our own lives.
Thinking about the stories in the 50th Law, it strikes me that these individuals, whether it's 50 Cent Napoleon or Reuben Hurricane Carter, they all had this incredible drive to create something,
Hmm.
to leave their mark on the world.
That's a great point. And that creative impulse, that desire to build and innovate, seems tied to this fearless mindset. It's as if by embracing fearlessness, we unlock a wellspring of creative energy and potential within
And it's
ourselves.
not just about external success.
Right.
It's also about that internal sense of mastery, that feeling of being in control of our destinies.
Exactly. It's about cultivating inner strength and resilience that allows us to weather the storms of life and emerge stronger.
Okay, before we wrap up, there's one more point I want to highlight. Remember when we talked about push beyond your limits, self-belief? Well, there's this idea from Dostoevsky that 50 Cent and Greene bring up.
Hmm.
It has to do with the idea that we shouldn't be trying to fit ourselves, into these neat little boxes.
Exactly. Dostoevsky argued that, our untamed desires, the things that make us unique, often defy easy categorization. And when we try to conform to societal expectations, we actually limit our potential.
So it's not just about believing in yourself. It's about embracing those parts of ourselves that might seem unconventional or even a little bad, in the eyes of others.
It's about recognizing that true freedom comes from expressing our authentic selves, even if that means going against the grain.
Yeah, this whole conversation has been about pushing beyond those self-imposed limitations, hasn't it?
Absolutely.
It's about rediscovering those core aspects of our personality
Mhm.
that we might have suppressed or hidden away.
And having the confidence to be ourselves, even when it feels uncomfortable or unconventional, that's where real power comes from.
All right, so as we wrap up our deep dive into the 50th law, what's the one thing you want our listener to walk away with?
Don't be afraid to bet on yourself. Believe in your own potential, even when others doubt you. Trust your instincts. Take calculated risks. And never stop pushing the boundaries of what you think is possible.
Beautifully said. That's the beauty of the 50th law. It's this blend of street smarts and historical wisdom that really gives us a framework for achieving success and living a fearless and fulfilling life.
And remember, this journey is unique for each of us. There's no one-size-fits-all formula. It's about taking these principles and applying them to our own individual circumstances and aspirations.
So to our listener, what's that one thing you've been putting off, that dream you've been too afraid to pursue? What would it take to embrace a little bit of that 50th law energy and make it happen?
Fearlessness isn't the absence of fear. It's the courage to act in spite of it. You have more power than you realize, and the only limits you have are the ones you impose on yourself.
And with that, we'll leave you to ponder those questions and continue your exploration of fearlessness and mastery. Until next time, keep pushing those boundaries and never stop learning